So, I got a little piece published in this journal, Jesus the Imagination. It seems to be about sociology, Celtic Christianity, side of Christianity, the body, the kingdom, the earth and creation, and all of that. So, yeah, it seems like pretty solid content. Flipping through the other pieces. But I wanted to read the piece, which I've already updated a little bit, and it's still a work in progress, this one. And then just talk somewhat about my current ideas and concept of poetry or just of writing, because I'm trying to rehabilitate myself into writing, which used to be my whole identity, but in just such an unhealthy way that I've almost avoided the whole thing. I've had to avoid the whole thing, but I still I still do poetry sometimes. It's easier. Anyway, this piece is called Messiah. Beloved, what have we made of you? You climbing, feet splayed into tree branch, its sap, your blood, the maker's mind pulsing into the soil, into the river. Your arms open, laughing. You laughing, looking down at us, shaking leaves into our hair, shaking truth into our hearts, shaking loose the alabaster casing that seals our retinas. You, jeans unspooling into the gutter dust, your gang of gangly teenagers, shrugging at the snobs, arms around shoulders, picking fights, drinking you in. That virtue you breathe in a tide of light unravels our clotted arteries, pulls out and pounds the iron filings in our blood through your wrists into your veins. We have made of you a paper prophet whose eyes are scooped eggs, savoring blandly of eternity. We have made of you footprints of lightning and brimstone. We have made of you a fist to bunch the figured tapestry of life into the gossamer limbo, the flaming wool blindfold of the hereafter. When you stitched heaven into earth and stamped hell out of our hearts, we have made of you a haunted, hollow figure, foot in the grave, eyes immaterially bright. When you stepped out of the tomb into new-sprung earth, and now sprint around the globe to pull us by our shirt collars out of its whitewashed teeth. There that go. Yeah, so I wrote this about false images of Christ that I had versus what I was and still am discovering of sort of the heart of the thing, which is really quite the opposite of popular images. And yeah, this poem, it's to me, when I look at it, it's like a work in progress. There's parts that I think are really pretty solid, or that I like right now, and then there's parts that it's eh. Because to me, I guess I'll preface this by saying, in the spirit of not being super perfectionist or super critical about art, it's communication. It's a piece of communication. It exists as it is right now. and like gets the point basically across I was trying to make. So it has like that amount of value, and I guess I can appreciate it on that level as just like something that exists as a piece of communication. But I do perceive, it gets back to that, what I was talking about in that one video about like, I don't remember what I titled it, but it was about like external, that shift when something gets a heart of its own and like an internal gravity and logic and becomes almost inevitable feeling and like intrinsically valuable and can like stand on its own. And that is a shift that I perceive, which has obviously to do with a lot of things. It has to do with my perception, my taste, and where I am in my life and the circumstances of the piece of art in me. It's like a relationship thing. CJ the X says all of this in a much more entertaining way than me. Love them. But yeah, that said, I do notice a shift. Like with some pieces of art or communication, I can be like, okay, this is what it is. It's good for what it is as a piece of communication. With others, there's like a transcendent element to it where it just feels inevitable. It feels complete. And like every little piece, especially in poetry, every little piece, every word, every image is in its place. It's inevitable. You couldn't change it, or you wouldn't want to change it. And that's what I admire in a piece of art that I would like really deeply admire just for itself, from the perspective of like artistic excellence. But I'm in the process of like rethinking all of this. So yeah. Anyhow, there are a few, and then of course you also know that like, I don't know, my taste will continue to change and my perception will continue to become more refined, so that in a few years, something that now seems like, oh, perfect and complete, in a few years, if I were to look back, I would probably see things that I could improve and alter a little bit. I'm trying to frame writing, the process of writing, as a writer. Ugh, that term still just like gets me, man. This morning I was like, okay, I'm gonna go on one tangent. I'm trying to put a little pin in my. I need paragraph. I need a parentheses in my speech. I need like an outline. I wish that I could do like the VR augmented reality thing and just have like notes just in the air so that you could see. But oh man, where was I? Okay, VR out. Yeah, this morning I was listening to the Normocast climbing podcast, but then it was like this writer who had made the only well-acclaimed literary fiction piece about just like rock climbing. And I listened to like 10 minutes of it, and then I had to stop listening to it because my thoughts were going bad places. Yeah, I've just connected all of my sort of identity and value and like what I have to offer to the world to writing for so long in quite an unhealthy way, never being satisfied with my contributions or with my pieces, and writing them in a way that was pushing myself too much and forcing it too much. And so just like the whole area is like a minefield, and I still write all the time, constantly my diary, and I'll work with images and words and symbols, and I manipulate language all the time. I really love that, but I have to sort of just like let it happen and like not think about it too much, because if I think about it, then the machinery of like the critical perfectionist all that just like gets activated. Anyhow, so go back to the original thread. I think we're back there now. As a writer, trying to think of the process more as like climbing, because There is also a pursuit of perfection, at least for some people, in that realm, but it's much more clear with climbing that the joy of it is in the process. And I think the only way that I'm going to get back to, or that I'm going to be able to enjoy writing in a healthy way and honestly produce things that are good and that don't come from just me forcing myself, is to treat it more like that and to enjoy the process of refining more than, not more than, to enjoy the process of refining in itself and almost put the emphasis on that rather than on the finished product, even if in practice the emphasis is on the finished product, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So yeah, writing, poetry, process. And this one is, it is what it is. Does have a central idea. It says something. The imagery is not perfect. But so I think it makes a good example. Well, yeah, it's just an interesting duality. I guess this just gets back to the duality of like process and thing, or like verb and noun, like entities and sort of the flow of things. Because both of that is that there is that duality there. Like back to my ideas of like crucifixion and the particular and the transcendent particular. Like on one hand, even up the ultimate example of an entity. Like when you're making art, to me, you're just making an entity like anything else. It's much the same thing as being a living being. A living being is never finished, never complete, and always in process of getting better. At the same time, there is a certain transcendent like perfection and completeness in each particular moment, in each particular aspect, in each particular being. And there are definitely entities that you would say are more and less like good or healthy or complete or existing than others. But yeah, lining up with the deep imagery, especially in Christianity, of word as body. I think of writing in terms of that as well. And usually I have an easier time writing, especially lately, poetry or very like loose mythology feeling little scenes instead of something like a novel or a short story where it's very grounded in chronological events. A couple of things about writing, especially poetry. So the first one being just that, like in, I guess I would say, an excellent piece of poetry, every word or image or concept is in its place. It's inevitable, and you couldn't change it. And then the poems of mine that I like what I'm trying to do with my poetry is a similar thing to what I'm trying to do with like that note that I had taken. the other day for that other video, just like ideas and images connected in this sort of structure. It's not really a linear structure, but like in this structure that coheres. Yeah. And it's like underneath the words is almost in, I think it's more like geometry or like math or equations. But I don't know anything about that. Or like, yeah, I'm not good enough with math to be able to make really those analogies, but I think it's like that. But like there's a network, there's like a structure of correspondences and of symbols and imagery and gestalts, like a web underneath the words, connecting all through the linear, like all through the poem, and connecting to the wider world, and just like this whole structure of correspondences underneath, and also a like internal logical structure, keeping the flow of the poem going from one image and one idea to the next and to the next. I'm wondering if there is a poem that's, I'm sure if I could find an example of something that feels really inevitable like this. Maybe not that I've written. No. I guess what's important isn't the words to me, but like the ideas beneath the words first, and then finding the words that properly clothe and capture those ideas. But it's like the symbolic structure underneath. So, for instance, in this one, obviously this is in dialogue with the entire imagery structure of Christianity, and it's like it's just very easy to tie those in, and it just sort of happens, start writing and I'm like, oh, cross stuff here, oh, resurrection stuff here, tree of life, tree, there's just so many images that recur and get elaborated on, and I start writing and they just sort of appear. So for instance, this bit, the image in my head was just of like Jesus at some point just like climbing in a tree, and like, he would go into a boat and teach, he would go wherever, and just like teaching from up there. Of course, there's a double image of his being up in a tree because of the cross and everything. So, his feet against the tree branch, his arms open. There's sort of that double reference going on, and those moments are connected. And I think I would like to put more tree stuff into here, and more like tree of life, tree of good and evil into here at some point, if I could find a place for it, which would give more coherence to the whole. I think that should be interwoven more. Yeah. That part, and then resurrection imagery, the tomb. So the alabaster casing that seals our retinas, there's a little bit of whitewashed sepulcher thing going on there, and also like seals as in the stone, over the tomb going on there. And I guess, like, I don't know, Saul was healed from blindness by having the scales fall from the eyes. That part could, so that those references could probably be cleared up a little more. On the verbal level, a lot of this ends up coming through by I like make a lot of puns basically, and like double meanings, or packing multiple meanings into one word. I love that. I think I take it really far sometimes to where the poem becomes basically unintelligible to anyone except me. But it's very satisfying. when there's a one word and it like means several things at the same time and they all fit. And so the tomb comes up there, and then also, of course, here, when you stepped out of the tomb into New Sprung, that one's quite obvious. Whitewashed teeth, there you go, about the um, alabaster casing bit again. So maybe I should do this. Okay. Because this is what happens in my head when I'm like reading something or working with it. If I can make these different colors. So like tree. Can I make these different colors? I cannot. Shame. Okay, well the highlights would have to be different colors by theme. Okay, so we have the tree bit, and then there's no more tree bits anymore. Technically new sprung earth. I don't know, spring. Okay. There's like fabric imagery here, like thread. Here. There's thread here. There's also thread here. There's also like blood, heart, sort of here, and then this isn't, but technically blood, technically heart. Oh well, yeah, there it is again. This is a little messy. Wait, so tomb, resurrection here. Maybe the scooped eggs bit. I could probably work that into like an empty tomb pun in some way. Savoring is I wanted to make it just savor so that there would be the pun on savior. Anyhow, where was I? I was talking about the tomb, though. Okay. Yeah, so tomb again. Resurrection again. And here, it's the same. And then, all this is fabric, thread. This is the kind of thing, these would just sort of like light up and be threaded together. And eventually it becomes too much for me to hold in my mind anymore, just like all falls apart and I lose the coherence. But I'm trying to hold all of these different interacting threads in wider categories and like symbols underneath the words, threaded through the poem in me at once, and then like bring those out in the words, and then of course even in like the rhythm and the sonic devices. And this poem doesn't sound very good. I love playing with like the sound, and I'm not experienced with formal poetry, but I like internal rhyme and consonants and assonance and all of that. This one is just too rough. I hadn't even really thought about that, but that also ties into it. New sprung earth and now sprint. New sprung and now sprint. That just sort of happened. That's stuff like that. Continues to give it like a sense of coherence. So you can see there's like just different. And then this is all like the web of imagery in the poem, right, is interacting with, say, the entire symbolic web of structure of symbols in Christianity. And then also with my own personal web of symbols, in which I live and move and have my being, really. And like I have a lot of personal associations with the idea of a river, and then tree, and then also the heart a lot. And there's some of that in this. And if I was to work on it more, there'd probably be more heart and blood stuff, because I use those over and over. I think in one sense that can become repetitive and you want to bring in new things, such as the whole scooped eggs line. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's weird. Maybe it's a bold and interesting move. paper and scooped eggs don't go together, which they should be more coherent. But yeah, I'm sort of mixing metaphors there. There's a lot of metaphor mixing going on in this in general, because again, it's rough draft. But let's see. If anybody has any, if you have any writing that you want to like me to like critique, I might. I don't know. I don't want to like take the heart out of anybody because I tend to be really harsh. But no, maybe not anymore. Hopefully, I'm not harsh anymore. I don't want to be harsh. It just happens. But anyway, I have a lot of fun. Like, it's very satisfying. The process, honestly, is satisfying for me of like drawing out stuff and seeing how it can be better. It's just learning to do that without, like, in a balanced way and without destroying that which is there. But it's very satisfying. Okay, lightning. Lightning, I also often tie lightning into like lightning, tree, blood, heart, fractal, because it's like the same image, but in this case that doesn't happen. I was wanting to make this footprints part, like, you know that whole cliche about like the footprints in the sand. I was wanting to make that like a reference. I know, okay, if you have sand, then you could have lightning hit the sand and like it turns into glass. And I was trying to bring that out, but I couldn't figure out how. But I want to, because that is the other half of what people do to Nostro Jesu. It's like either super strict and horrible, or sentimental cliche. There's not even power or meaning in it anymore. Okay, so savoring. There is that line in Job as well about an egg white, which I think that's why I thought of it. Oh, stitched heaven into earth. Okay, yeah. Oh, right. This is all fabric. So I guess I should just, yeah. Thread. Yeah. And the chaotic nature of where I'm going with this is how it works when I'm working on a poem too. There's just like no order to it. I start and then I go somewhere else and then somewhere else, and yeah, it's very rough. It's very jumpy all over the place. I did want to say the best to me, the part that touched me and like reading over this was I didn't even realize it, but the part that touched me most in this poem and that I like the best is this part. Pulls out and pounds the iron filings in our blood through your wrists into your veins. Because, okay, so you have the image of the crucifixion, right? And Jesus, he's on the cross, and they put nails through the wrists, right? And so there's that image. And then there's the idea of humanity being incorporated into God, into the body of Christ through the crucifixion and through the blood, and the blood is the life of the flesh, right? So through the blood of, Christ being almost mixed with ours. And I'd used this imagery elsewhere in a little short, more prayer kind of piece that I wrote. What was it? What was it? Oh man. But anyway, I had used the image of like being pulled into Christ's veins and like therefore into also his heart and his life and the current of his life. And I like that. I like that image. Like, I think in those terms, I like it. And then, so that idea, the crucifixion, the nails, incorporation into the body of Christ and the blood, and then also through Christ taking into himself and incorporating our sin, right? I don't necessarily have the same concept of sin as the usual Christian idea, but it's through incorporating and taking the very worst, the most corrupt, the most imperfect, the worst things that humanity has to offer. Certainly that this incorporation is like done. And iron filings are also like, there's iron in blood too, right? And then like iron filings are like attracted to, and that's an image that I use sometimes too, like a, they'll be attracted to the magnet. So there's this idea of like an attraction of that, if I be lifted up from the earth, I'll draw all men unto me. Like, so there's just all of that going on in those three lines. But it's coherent to me. It's a coherent image. I can follow the thread of it. It's very dense symbolically. It expresses what to me is like basically the most precious truth of Christianity in shorthand. So, yeah, like, So the iron filing, I guess, like the iron filings in our blood being the sin, corruption, etc., of humanity and of this cosmos, that gets pulled out, right, by Christ, and by being like pounded into his wrists, like in the crucifixion, and in that, through that process, also, our blood is like connected with. Yeah. I suppose the point of the poem is that the poem says this better than another explanation says it, therefore I don't need to explain. So yeah. Pulls out, pounds the iron filings in our blood through your wrists into your veins. I'm gonna find real quick that other little short image. I wrote a lot of like prayer, contemplative stuff that's just shorter, and not really worrying about technique, and that is just how I write these days. I don't think so much about how good it is. Okay, come on. There it is. Okay, you can't see Scrivener, my beloved Scrivener, but I will read it. It went, once upon a time I dipped my ear into the stream of God's speech. He talked my ear off, water on rock, sand on sandstone, then my head, dust, then the rest of me, until I was a heart, throbbing, dissolving. My blood flows into the water, into his side, into his heart. To sum it up, art is an entity like any other entity, and art is also like communication, so it's inherently a relationship thing. It has value. It has value because it is, and because it like conveys a certain message, but I perceive a certain like integrity in certain works of art that are just like perfect. Every piece is in place. It's coherent. You couldn't change a single word of that. And that's sort of a different order of things from something like this, which is a little rougher. When I look at a poem, I'm seeing the underlying network, nonlinear, just network of symbolism and imagery and wider realities and structures that it's referencing, and trying to tie that in as densely as possible and as coherently as possible, and like bring it out in each word. And also in the sound, it should also sound rhythmic, and the sounds should go together. And yeah, I just write when I have something I need to express. And right now I'm not doing anything arbitrary, technical, I'm going to train formal poetry. Okay, I'm going to write a poem about this, nothing artificial. It's just I look over it, if I see if I sort of engage with it and look at all of the threads and the different imagery, if there's something that stands out that I could tweak, I tweak it. I tweak it. If not, it's gotta wait till later. Yeah. I guess I should read it again now that I've done this analysis of it, and maybe now that you have a better idea of the underlying ideas that are in my head. Of course, everybody has their own meanings that a piece of art is going to bring out. And there's some songs like By the Oh Hellos where I read it, I hear it completely differently from their intended meaning, but it's really meaningful to me just in a different way. I think that's part of it. Anyway, Messiah. Beloved, what have we made of you? You climbing, feet splayed into tree branch, its sap, your blood, the maker's mind pulsing into the soil, into the river. Your arms open, you laughing, looking down at us, shaking leaves into our hair, shaking truth into our hearts, shaking loose the alabaster casing that seals our retinas. You, jeans unspooling into the gutter dust. Oh, I forgot that bit. Ooh. Oh. Dust is another image. Unto dust thou shalt, etc. And then I would go see if there was anywhere else I could draw that out more. And then I would be dust, tomb, I can usually connect it. You, jeans unspooling into the gutter dust, your gang of gangly teenagers, shrugging at the snobs, arms around shoulders, picking fights, drinking you in, that virtue you breathe in a tide of light, unravels our clotted arteries, pulls out and pounds the iron filings in our blood through your wrists into your veins. We have made of you a paper prophet. Okay, I guess that's a reference to the scripture, the letter of the law. That's another duality that could be put in there. Word and flesh, the law, tablets of stone. Interesting. We have made of you a paper prophet whose eyes are scooped eggs, savoring blandly of eternity. We have made of you footprints of lightning and brimstone. We have made of you a fist to bunch the figured tapestry of life into the gossamer limbo, the flaming wool blindfold of the hereafter. When you stitched heaven into earth and stamped hell out of our hearts, we have made of you a haunted, hollow figure, foot in the grave, eyes immaterially bright. When you stepped out of the tomb into new-sprung earth and now sprint around the globe to pull us by our shirt collars out of its whitewashed teeth.